Nick Ferrari at Breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
6 minutes before 8, we'll return to our conversation about the migrant crossing in a moment, but later in the show we're going to talk about the issues of supermarket deliveries, and let's bring into on that subject now Conservative MP and Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng. And I know you're going to tell, and I promise you I will give you a question about these proposals to reform the way regulation and rules are set in the UK, but I do think, seeing as 5 of this morning's newspapers feature the issue of these supermarket deliveries, and from Ealing to Edinburgh, Secretary of State, some of our shelves are bare of fresh fruit and other produce. This is caused by the pingdemic. We can't wait until August the 16th, as you alluded earlier in the week, can we? Good morning.
I think we can. I think you're right to say that there have been reports of shortages, but I think that we should stick to the rules. Obviously, we're reviewing the situation, so we're always looking at real-time evidence. We're always looking at reports of shortages. But I think that we can stick to the 16th of August.
What informed you of that, then?
Well, we looked at the evidence before. We thought that we wanted to lift restrictions on the 19th of July, and there was a clear evidence to suggest that was a good idea. But we also wanted to have a precaution in terms of protecting our people. So I think that self-isolation, once you're pinged, makes complete sense. And these restrictions aren't going to last forever. It's the 22nd of July now, as you know. But
it's more than 3 weeks, Mr. Kwarteng. And already, as I say, I'm looking at empty shelves from Ealing to Edinburgh. There's no fresh fruit. There's no chilled products.
There are
issues
reports
like that.
Yeah, there are reports of that, Nick. It's not something.
You keep saying reports, Mr. Kwarteng.
They're
Reports. They're not reports.
No, okay. There is evidence that there are shortages. These shortages are not universal. I mean, I went shopping yesterday. I didn't have a problem, but we are looking at places where there are shortages. Absolutely, and we're reviewing the situation in real time. Having said that, we've got clear rules as far as I'm concerned. I think they're very clear, and we want to stick to those rules.
Your picture's on the front page of the Financial Times because apparently, in a call with you, Mr. Kwarteng, a number of business leaders, I think it's more than a dozen actually, asked that there be some kind of fix to the so-called pingdemic, and the Director General of the CBI said that he just ended up with a compromise reopening of the economy. Business isn't happy over this, Mr. Kwarteng. What did you take from Tuesday's call?
No, I had a very constructive call with business leaders. And Tony Danker, who you've referred to, he's the CEO of the CBI, was very clear and said that he thought that we should move the 16th of August date. We should have moved that to the 19th of July. And I said very clearly to him that we had a different view. We looked at the evidence, we looked at the incidents, the hospitalizations, and we took the view we did. That was the government policy. And you will know, Nick, whatever we did, people would have had something to complain about. There was no way in a situation like this that any government policy would command universal agreement and assent. There were always different views. There were always people who said we should lock down, for an extra 3 months or forever. In some instances, there were always people who said we should lift all the restrictions earlier. Okay. And we've taken a balanced view of that.
And just before we move on, Mr. Kwarteng, can you say that you're ruling out the issue of possibly using the military to deliver food supplies if required, or is that under review?
It's not under review. I think there's a lot of stories and people being very, very concerned, as they should be. But as far as I know, we're not looking at bringing in troops or anything of that kind.
All right. If the Brexit deal that was done as regards the issues concerning Northern Ireland and the importation of certain sandwiches and cold meat products and whatever, if it is so onerous, why on earth did the United Kingdom sign it, Secretary of State?
So you'll remember that the whole the May deal, as was 3 years ago, had this huge section which was called the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Yes.
We sought to modify it, and we had to get a deal. So we did get a deal. We always said that we'd have to see how the protocol actually, what conditions it would give rise to when we'd actually left the EU. We've reviewed the situation over the last few months. We think that it could operate much more smoothly, and we want to enter into a conversation with the EU to make that happen.
But why
these things aren't set in stone? I mean,
Indeed, and I listened to the chairman of Archie Norman, who highlights the lunacy that it takes 3 vets to sign off on one type of Marks and Spencer sandwich to get through. And I realise the lunacy of that. I do. But why did we ever put ourselves in a position that would allow that to take place? Who thought it was an idea to sign off on that?
Look, we could go into the history of this. The Northern Ireland Protocol emerged from the discussions in 2018, and essentially we got a modified version of that deal through Parliament, and that was the basis on which we left the EU. And you'll remember at that time it was not even clear that we would leave the EU. There were people talking about a second referendum. There were people talking about no deal.
So this wasn't a deal done at any cost, then, Mr. Kwarteng, as some would say.
It wasn't a deal done at any cost, but there was an imperative to do a deal. There was an imperative to deliver on the referendum and leave the EU, and that's what we did.
On a related conversation, you're talking today of proposals to reform and modernise the way rules and regulations are set in the UK. This, I read, is for the first time in a generation. What does that mean to my listeners?
It means essentially that for 50 years, more or less, 48 years, we were in an EU legal order, if you like, where their rules essentially applied across the UK, and now we have the opportunity to look at our rules and make our own decisions about them. That's what it means.
Okay. We've talked about the supermarket sector right at the start, and I'm sure you'd be the first to say the fantastic job that the men and women have done there. If we look at one of the big four, Morrisons, are you in favour of this possible deal? It means they'll be bought out by a US private equity consortium.
Look, I've spoken to the chairman of Morrisons only this week. And he's a Brit. He's someone who has worked in supermarkets for years, and he's very excited about the prospect of people coming into this country, investing in our assets. When we were told, after all, that wouldn't happen because of Brexit, it's a great sign, a vote of confidence in the UK that people are wanting to invest in our businesses.
Yes, I mean, I think I'd be excited if I was going to make somewhere in the region of £19 million, which the chief executive is going to get from the deal. Is it good for the shoppers and the staff?
I think
you're a very smart bloke. You'll know that in the eyes of some, or indeed the ears of some, the words private equity can send
it sounds
a chill
scary.
of fear down the spine.
No, I agree. But I've always campaigned for a global Britain. I've always campaigned for a Britain that was open to foreign investment. And I'm very excited as Business Secretary to be having conversations with lots of people, not just Americans.
Right, but I mean, the
French
boss is going to be elated if he's getting 19 million quid. I just wonder what it means for the men and women on the tills.
So I think we obviously have to wait and see what happens.
Indeed.
But I think it's a really good prospect because the business didn't have any investment. And if you've got foreign investors who want to buy the assets, they are investing in the business. And he talked to me about the deal, and I said that this was a vote of confidence in the UK. It's not a bad thing if foreigners want to come and buy really good assets in your country. It means that you're attracting capital, you're attracting investment, and that creates jobs. And that's not a bad thing.
Indeed. And lastly, on the subject of pay, a 3% pay award to NHS staff. I know that an independent review body, I know that's not set by the government.
Yeah, that's right.
But is that really fair, Secretary of State?
So Nick,
for the job they've done. Sorry, Kwasi.
No, Nick. You're absolutely right. I mean, no one denies that the NHS have been brilliant in this period. You will remember that a few months ago, when we proposed 1%, there was outcry and indignation, and we said very clearly at the time we will look at what the independent pay review would do. They came back with 3%, and we've decided that that's a really good way to proceed with this. Now, clearly, in an ideal world, you might want to increase that. Who knows? But the 3% was an independent figure that arrived at independently, and the government has followed that.
But just lastly, the Daily Mirror has worked out the figures. To give NHS staff 15%, which I would say is a little bit heavy, that would cost £5 billion. The test and trace has already cost £37 billion. Where do you imagine, Secretary of State, the money has been better spent?
So I think that you've got to look at the economy as a whole. What's happened over the last 18 months is that millions and millions of workers have been furloughed. They haven't received any increases in wages. On the contrary, they've been flat or in some cases declining. The businesses have been struggling to stay afloat. And I think in this, and we spent something like £350 billion on the loans and on the furlough scheme supporting the economy. In this context, I think the 3% that was arrived at independently by the Independent Pay Review is fair.
Always enjoy our conversation together. Thank you. I hope you've done the shopping for the weekend and you don't have to go out again. I hope you had one of those super large trolleys when you went yesterday. It's Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng appearing here on LBC, where 4 minutes after 8, news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, retailers say they're facing increasing pressure to keep shelves fully stocked because so many staff are being pinged by the NHS